When everyone had lost hope, the room had become a place where even silence felt heavy. Machines hummed softly, their rhythm more reliable than the breath of the little girl lying on the bed. Her eyes were open, but they stared past the ceiling, past the lights, past the people who came and went with forced smiles and rehearsed sympathy. She had learned not to expect anything anymore. Hope had been promised to her too many times and broken just as often. Her name was Ira. Once, she had been a child who ran through wide hallways of glass and marble, her laughter echoing louder than her footsteps. Once, she had believed the world was kind because it had always been kind to her. She was the daughter of a powerful man, a man whose name opened doors, whose signature changed lives, whose voice was followed without question. But power had limits. Money had limits. Influence had limits. And none of them could move her fingers when the accident stole her body from her. The night everything changed was ordinary. Too ordinary to be remembered clearly. A car ride, rain on the windshield, a moment of distraction, a sound like the world breaking in half. After that, there were sirens, white lights, and voices shouting words she couldn't understand. When she woke up, she couldn't feel her legs. When she tried to scream, nothing came out. Doctors spoke carefully. They always do. They wrapped truth in soft words and hope in statistics. Severe spinal injury, minimal chances of recovery, years of therapy, lifelong dependence. Each sentence landed like a verdict. Her father stood beside her bed, his shoulders straight, his jaw tight, absorbing every word as if absorbing them could change their meaning. He nodded, asked questions, wrote checks. He believed that if there was a solution in the world, he could buy it. Months passed. Specialists from different countries examined her. Machines were brought in. Experimental treatments were tried. Some promised progress, others offered miracles disguised as science. Nothing worked. Her body remained still, silent, unresponsive. Slowly, the doctors stopped using the word when, and started using the word if. Ira noticed the change before anyone said it out loud. She noticed the way nurses avoided her eyes. The way conversations ended when she entered the room. The way her father's voice sounded tired for the first time in her life. She noticed how hope left quietly, without an announcement. At night, when the lights were dimmed and the world felt far away, she would stare at her hands and try to remember what it felt like to move them. She would imagine closing her fingers, gripping the edge of the blanket, feeling something real. But imagination is a cruel companion. It gives and takes in the same breath. Eventually, she stopped trying. Her father still came every day. He sat beside her, spoke about work, about plans, about the future as if speaking it into existence might make it real. But his words had lost their power. She loved him, but she could feel his desperation, and it scared her. It made her feel like a burden he was carrying instead of a daughter he was holding. One evening, after a particularly long day of tests and disappointment, she asked him a question that had been growing inside her for weeks. "Dad," she said softly, her voice barely louder than the machines around her, "what if this is it?" He froze. For the first time, he didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved away from her face, as if the room suddenly held something more interesting than his daughter's fear. When he spoke, his voice was firm, almost rehearsed. "This is not it," he said. "We will find something, I promise." But promises don't sound the same when they're empty. That night, after he left, Ira cried silently. Tears slid down the sides of her face into the pillow, unnoticed by anyone. She cried not because she was in pain, but because she was tired. Tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of being strong for everyone else. The next morning, a new therapist entered her room. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit or carrying a thick file. His clothes were simple, his shoes worn. He introduced himself with a quiet voice and a gentle smile. "I'm Daniel," he said. "I'll be working with you today." She didn't respond. She didn't see the point. There had been many Daniels before him, many therapists with different methods and confident smiles. They all left eventually, taking their optimism with them. Daniel noticed her silence but didn't push. He adjusted the equipment, checked her vitals, and moved slowly, respectfully, as if afraid of disturbing something fragile. When he spoke again, it wasn't about therapy or exercises. "My daughter loves drawing," he said casually, as if they were old friends. "She says colors make her feel brave." Ira glanced at him briefly, surprised. Therapists didn't usually talk about themselves. They talked about goals and progress and effort. She said nothing, but she listened. "She's 7, he continued. "Lost her mother 2 years ago. It's just the two of us now." There was no self-pity in his voice. Just truth. He began the session, guiding her through small movements, asking her to imagine signals traveling through her body. She had done this before. It felt pointless, but there was something different about him. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't watching the clock. He spoke to her like she was still a person, not a problem to be solved. When the session ended, he didn't offer encouragement or false hope. He simply said, "I'll see you tomorrow," and meant it. And he did come back. The next day, and the day after that. Over time, Daniel became a constant. He talked about his daughter, about cooking disasters, about how he learned patience the hard way. Sometimes he talked about fear. Sometimes about failure. He never talked about miracles. He never promised results. And strangely, that made Ira trust him more than anyone else. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the window, she finally spoke more than a few words. "Why do you keep coming?" she asked. He looked at her for a moment, then smiled gently. "Because someone once kept coming for me," he said. "When I didn't believe I was worth the effort." She didn't ask him to explain. She didn't need to. Weeks passed. There was no sudden change, no dramatic breakthrough. But something inside Ira shifted. She began to look forward to the sessions. She began to imagine movement again, not because she believed it would happen, but because Daniel believed she deserved the chance. One evening, after a particularly exhausting session, Ira whispered something she hadn't said out loud in a long time. "I don't think I'll ever get better." Daniel paused. He lowered his voice, leaned closer, and whispered back, "Not for the machines, not for the world, but just for her. I'll help you anyway." Those words didn't promise recovery. They didn't deny reality. They simply refused to abandon her. Something broke inside her then. Not in a painful way, but in a way that let light in. She cried openly this time, and Daniel didn't look away. From that moment on, the work felt different. It wasn't about walking again or proving doctors wrong. It was about showing up. About trying, even when failure felt guaranteed. Months later, during a routine session, something unexpected happened. Ira felt a flicker, so small she thought she imagined it. A warmth, a whisper of sensation in her fingers. She didn't say anything at first, afraid it would disappear if she named it. But it happened. Again. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, I think I felt something." He didn't cheer. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded, his eyes shining with quiet determination. "Then we keep going," he said. The doctors were cautious. They always were. But tests confirmed what Ira already knew. Tiny progress. Minimal, fragile, but real. Her father watched all of this from a distance at first. He didn't understand how the man with no power, no money, no influence had reached his daughter when he couldn't. One day, he stopped Daniel in the hallway. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You don't have to go this far." Daniel looked at him calmly. "Because when everyone had lost hope," he said softly, "someone once told me they would help. And they did." The CEO said nothing. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Humility. Recovery was slow, painfully slow. There were setbacks and tears and days when hope seemed foolish again. But Ira was no longer alone in the dark. She had learned that hope didn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it was just someone staying when leaving would be easier. Years later, Ira stood on a stage, supported by braces, her steps careful but real. The applause was overwhelming, but she searched the crowd for one face. She found him near the back, standing beside a young girl holding a drawing full of bright colors. Their eyes met. He smiled. She smiled back. When everyone had lost hope, a single father had whispered, "I'll help." And that whisper had been louder than any promise ever made.